I was blown away, to say the least. I
Yeah.
mean, the stuff he'd come up with to try to get me back was sickening.
It is a bizarre and terrifying story out of Georgia. A woman's ex-husband is locked up, and Lifetime made a movie about her ordeal after he was convicted of pretending to be an intruder so he could attack her. She joins us to talk about that night, his case, and where her family goes from here. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We have got a different one for you right now. It is so strange, it is so harrowing that it inspired a movie on Lifetime called Gaslit by My Husband, the real-life story of Morgan Metzer. So first, some background for you. Morgan Metzer met her husband Rodney in high school. They had a child in 2011 who sadly died just a few weeks after being born from a congenital heart defect. Eventually, they had twins, but their marriage was on the rocks. Rodney was a financial trader, had reportedly lost a large portion of his inheritance money. The relationship soured to the point where a divorce was finalized in December of 2020. But Morgan claims Rodney would stop at nothing to get her back, even allegedly faking cancer. You heard me right. Faking a cancer diagnosis, complete with documents, all to try to win her back, win her sympathy. But then we fast forward to New Year's Eve 2020. The twins, their children, they were away. Morgan was home alone. And she awakes to find a masked man standing in her bedroom doorway wearing some sort of voice distortion tool so that he sounded like something out of Batman. She says the intruder attacked her, beat her repeatedly with a pistol. She had a large black eye. And eventually, the culprit strangled her almost to the point of unconsciousness. The injuries that she was left with were brutal. A news release from the prosecutor's office talked about this in more detail. He zip-tied her hands, assaulted her, placed a pillowcase over her head, dragged her to the deck. He left her there face down, instructing her not to move until she heard a car honk. He told her she would be shot if she moved. Now here's the kicker. This masked intruder also reportedly told her that she was going to miss her kids and husband, which made Morgan very suspicious. A very weird thing to say about her husband, who just brings that up out of nowhere. Well then, not too long after, Rodney shows up at the house. Yeah, his place was about 15 minutes away. He said someone had knocked on his door, yelled Morgan, so he came running to her house. But that is not what investigators say happened. No. Quote, after leaving his ex-wife tied up outside on the deck, Metzer went to his apartment, changed his clothes, and came back to her home, where he found her still lying face down, tied up outside. Evidence in this case was substantial. Investigators with the Cherokee Sheriff's Office located a handgun in the defendant's vehicle, zip ties in his apartment that were ultimately matched to the zip ties used to bind his ex-wife. Investigators also located surveillance video of the defendant leaving Lowe's Home Improvement carrying, you guessed it, a pack of zip ties, although he claimed he didn't know what zip ties were in an interview after his arrest. Surveillance video of the defendant coming home to his apartment and leaving a few minutes later wearing different clothing contradicted his claims of his whereabouts leading up to the assault. You know what other evidence they had? Internet searches. The defendant's cell phone and laptop revealed an internet search history that included the following: how long before you starve to death, how to change the sound of your voice, and how long it takes to choke someone unconscious. So Rodney, he was arrested by police within a few hours of the attack, charged with a number of crimes, including kidnapping, home invasion, aggravated assault, family violence, sexual battery, false imprisonment, eavesdropping. So Rodney ended up taking a plea deal in August of 2021. He entered a guilty plea to 14 charges. He was sentenced to 70 years. Now, 25 of those years will be spent in prison, and the rest he has to serve on probation. So presumably, if he survives, he will be released one day. Now, this very twisted story, as I mentioned, was made into a made-for-TV movie. Jana Kramer of One Tree Hill fame, she stars as single mom Morgan Metzer as she lives through this harrowing experience. called Gaslit by My Husband, the Morgan Metzer story, premiered over the weekend. Well, joining me right now to talk about this is Morgan Metzer herself. Morgan, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. First, let me just say, I'm so happy you're okay. I mean, that was an incredibly harrowing situation. When I was reading about your case, it's a miracle, you survived this. It's incredible to think about what happened. So let me just say, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm just happy you're safe and sound.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you as well, too.
So you have to explain it to me. There's this movie that's premiering about your story, and it's great because your story is being told for the world. But I have to feel, is that kind of weird for you right now to see that happening, being played out, your story being retold in that way?
Well, some parts are a little strange to me. I guess more so the night of the attack and the parts of the movie are a little bit more triggering, I guess, for me. But other than that, I mean, it just feels invigorating to get my story out and to let women hear my story so they can possibly get out of certain situations that I was in earlier.
Have people come up to you and said, thank you for sharing this? I'm in a similar situation, or this was a kind of a wake-up call for me. Have you kind of seen that already as you have the ability to tell your story?
Yes, after everything kind of gets aired, say I have an interview or the movie or anything else like that, I will get flooded with messages, say on Facebook or Instagram. Some people find my cell phone number, but a lot of the women are constantly saying, yes, thank you so much for telling me your story. I was in the same situation. I wish I had known better. Or others would be like, I think I might be in that situation now, but thank you for telling me things to look out for. So yes, I get a ton of those, and then also just I'm happy that you're safe and we're praying for you.
Does it help you process the events in a way?
Well, I've talked about it since day one so many times, my story, that I feel like I've talked through it so much that not the emotion of it's out, but I feel like I've processed it already so much that it didn't emotionally mess with me as much as I expected it to. But they did a beautiful job with sharing my story, and that's exactly how I would have portrayed it. So.
How involved were you in the actual production of the movie and the story of the movie? How involved were you with that?
I was involved quite a bit. We set up a time to speak with the writers, the producers, and I kind of sat there and told them my story for a few hours, gave them some examples, kind of pieced everything together, and they had written up the first script. And when I got the first script, I read through it, and then they set up a second meeting to hear my input, say if I wanted a few things changed, or I wasn't comfortable with something, or I was comfortable adding more to it. So I was able to read the script, the first one and the rough draft, and they were able to really respect me and let me be heard, that I could, say what I was comfortable with putting in there.
And I hope, people watch it. I hope people read about your story because it's an important one to tell. What I was curious to ask you was, how do you tell this to your kids? How do you explain to them what happened here?
So my kids were almost 9 years old when this happened. When they were in Florida with my sister at the time, I had them stay there longer. They missed quite a bit of school so I could heal up and I wouldn't have bruises. And when I got them home, I sat them down and said, guys, when you get in trouble, there's always a punishment. If you've done something small or big, it just depends on the situation, how bad you get punished. And I said, well, Daddy has done something that's really bad, and unfortunately he has to get punished. But what he did was very, very bad, so he's going to be away for majority of your life. And I didn't go into details. I just pretty much said, Daddy hurt Mommy, but he still loves you guys very much. But we won't be able to see him at the time. But now that they're getting older, they ask for a little bit more information. So, they'll be like, well, how did he hurt you? I'll still explain it, not in big depth, but, they're 12 years old and they have Google. So,
Right.
they look up things and they're starting to get a little bit more curious about it.
I can imagine how tough that is. Do they want to see him in prison? Have they had an opportunity to see them in prison? What can you tell us about that?
Well, he has a TPO against me. So if he reaches out to me or my family or any of my close friends, he will have his sentencing extended. So his parole will be taken away and possibly more years in prison. The kids don't really talk about him much. I think it's because they saw the abuse that I was given, and my son was also physically and verbally abused by him quite a bit. Randomly, they'll just say, "What does daddy look like again?" And I'll say, "Do you want to see a picture?" And they're like, "No, it's okay." And we had the conversation about going to see him. And I said, "Guys, right now, you're under the age to make your own decisions." I said, "But when you hit 18 years old, you can decide whether or not if you'd like to go see him. But until the meantime, mommy has your best interest at heart, and I just don't think it's the best idea."
Stories like this one really make you wonder, how well do you know the people in your life? That is a scary concept to think about. But TruthFinder, our incredible sponsor and partner, may be able to help you out here. So TruthFinder is a service that can provide actual safety for you guys. And I say that because TruthFinder is one of the largest public record search services in the United States. Their whole goal is to help people like you learn about the people in their lives. And here's how it works. So you go on their website, truthfinder.com, and you type in a name. Make it easy. Type in Jesse Weber. When you do that, you type in my name, within minutes and a paid subscription purchase, you can access unlimited reports that can include information like phone numbers, location history, criminal and traffic records, including possible arrests, criminal convictions. I don't have those, but you get the idea. TruthFinder can be used to look up information about all different kinds of people. People you meet on social media, new dates, people you're selling to or buying to online, the parents of your child's friend. Look, you can never be too careful. We use it here on Law and Crime to research some of the cases we cover too. It's just a great, great tool. Now, here's the kicker. Right now, you can get 50% off of your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/LC Sidebar. Hope you check it out. You know, we kind of went through the backstory of it before we brought you on, Morgan. But when you look back and you think about what he did, does it still shock you? Or do you say, I go back to the relationship and I think this is something he was capable of doing?
It shocks me. I He was verbally abusive, but never did I think he'd ever be physically abusive. He was pro women not getting hurt. He wouldn't even watch a movie where women get abused. He was all about, just the complete opposite. Like, he was so protective, always made sure I was ready for any type of situation, say I was robbed or, anything like that. He was just so kind-hearted. And it still blows my mind even when I think about it, because majority of relationship together since I was 14 years old has been kind, soft touch, nothing anywhere remotely close to giving that signal.
Can you talk to us more about the gaslighting component of not only the event in question, but also just during the course of your relationship?
Well, a lot of times during the gaslighting with narcissism, they tend to take there's this big picture and they tend to take small chunks at a time, which could be something very little. Say if he was having a bad day and he lost money, or he didn't make as much money as he wanted to, he would say, "Oh, it's because you were interrupting me. It is your fault, or you came into my office." And he would end up putting that on me. So I would feel like, okay, well, I caused this. And then it may be another situation or scenario where, example, the kids have a bad day or do something wrong. They'll say, he'll say, "Well, you told them they could do that. Don't you remember that?" And I'm sitting in my head thinking, "No, but I guess so." And so I would start to believe what he said. I mean, it's just so many little things. It's hard to remember all of them, but it's just the tiny bit that he would take away from me. And then it became a really big picture of, this is what he's doing. He's making me out to be the bad person. He's turned everyone against me, even certain parts of my family at that time, because he convinced them he was the good guy and I was the problem. And situations I look back now, I'm like, wow, that is not what happened. And I can't believe I was just, I guess, what's the word? Under a spell, pretty much, thinking it was all my fault.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that happens in a lot of relationships. You see that happening, not clearly to this extent. And I got to tell you, the fake cancer diagnosis was something that I had to read again to make sure I understood that properly. How did you find out that he was lying about that?
Well, he did really well. He came up with fake documents from doctors from Emory Hospital here in Atlanta. I mean, I really believed him. He had proof, but I guess, during the investigation, they were able to find that they were forged documents. So at that
Yeah.
time, I was able to know that it was fake.
And you must have been shocked.
I was blown away, say the least. I
Yeah.
mean, the stuff he'd come up with to try to get me back was sickening. I mean, who lies about having cancer, especially when your brother died of cancer and your dad had cancer? Why would you do that?
And do you think that was what motivated him to attack you that day?
So the day he told me about his cancer, it was 2 days before New Year's Eve. So I think it was his last tactic to try to get me back. And I think he had a plan that if that didn't work, he would then attack me because he had already been buying supplies per the
Yeah.
investigation and finding them in stores and whatnot. It was his last attempt to try to get me back. And once that didn't happen, he pretty much walked away that day, pretty quiet, didn't say much until New Year's Eve is when he showed up.
How frightening was that moment for you? A masked intruder comes into your house, attacks you, ties you up. If I know that I don't, I really don't want to make you relive that moment, but if you can briefly describe it to us, what that was like for you.
It's so hard to describe that feeling. It was disheartening. It was just, I can't believe. I mean, I felt like I was invincible to all this. I never would have thought I would get robbed or mugged. And I just felt so alone and just scared and just outer body experience, really. I felt like I was pretty much watching it at an outer body experience. It
Yeah.
just, my heart felt like it was just crushed. I mean, just so many emotions were going through that it's really hard to explain, to be able to give somebody the picture of what it was.
There was a moment during that attack when he makes such an odd comment about, your husband, right? Thinking this is a stranger.
Mhm.
Was that the aha moment to you? This is, wait a minute, I know who did this.
Yes, that was the aha moment. And at that time, I don't know how I came up with it, but I knew he wanted me. He was trying to get me back. So that's when I said, please don't hurt my husband. I love him very much. And that's when the whole tone of the room changed. You could tell. And
Wow.
that's when I definitely knew it was him because he was thinking in his head, okay, I'm getting her back.
And when you found out that was really him, what was your reaction?
Well, I never accused him of being, the attacker. When the detectives came in, and once again, it was because I had been so brainwashed thinking I'm the bad person. Okay, this night was my fault. That's what I'm thinking in my head. This was my fault. What did I do wrong to have somebody come and do this? So I never said anything because I felt like I was never heard and the finger was always pointed at me. But when the detective came in, he looked at me and he goes, that was your ex-husband. I know a narcissist when I see one. And as
Mm,
soon as he said that, I just broke down and started crying because finally somebody saw what this man truly is, and I didn't have to say it. I
yeah.
had somebody in my corner that was fighting for me.
With all the evidence, against him and buying the supplies, it was just, it was, I'm not surprised he ultimately pled guilty and didn't really fight this. He was sentenced to 70 years. 25 of those will be spent in prison, but then the rest on probation.
Yep.
I know this is tough to think about, but 25 years is a long time from now. Do you ever envision a situation, and you do have young children together, but do you ever envision a situation where you would talk to him again? You would ever have him a part of your life? I mean, as you mentioned, you talked about the way he could potentially be a part of your kids' lives, but do you ever imagine that? Ever having him be a part of your life again?
Once he gets out,
Yeah.
I think it's inevitable. I am scared. I don't know if he's going to come out and try to finish what he did or if he's going to
Mm,
come out, a different man knowing what he did and paid, his dues and, hopefully might disappear in the wind at night, and I never see him again. But knowing his personality, that's not going to be that way.
yeah.
So I'm afraid that I am going to have some sort of connection with him if my children want to have it.
Did he ever apologize? Ever issue an apology for what happened?
He did in the courtroom. And when he spoke, I didn't really listen because everything he says is fake. So his apology, it was empty to me.
Morgan, I'm sure you've been told this before, but first time I get a chance to meet you, so I'm going to say it to you. You are incredibly powerful. And it's incredible to hear your story and hear how not only you survived this, but you've gotten some stronger over this, and you're sharing this story with so many people. What is it you want people to know from this story? You talked a little bit about the importance of the movie, but overall, if you have a message for our viewers, our listeners, what would that be?
I guess thank you for that compliment. I really appreciate it. There's some days that I just don't feel like I'm powerful at all, and I just feel like I'm just weak at times. So I appreciate that. I guess my biggest thing since the beginning is women learning to speak to each other. Just this day and age, every woman wants to portray that they have the perfect life. They have the perfect husband, the perfect kids, the perfect house, the perfect car. It just everything is perfect. And we're doing a disservice to each other as women, not speaking and opening up and sharing our daily lives, whether it's bad or good. There are good and you want to share it. But the more women can speak to each other, the more I feel like we can save each other, because if you talk about certain things, someone goes, okay, that's not right. And it'll raise an eyebrow going, okay, well, maybe that wasn't okay. Maybe he is in the wrong, or maybe I am being abused. But if we keep being quiet with each other and trying to look like we're perfect, we're not going to help each other out.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point. And Morgan, I mean, thank you so much for sharing your story with me, but also our listeners and our viewers. I know this is going to help people who listen to it, and hopefully it can save somebody who's in a very similar situation. But from all of us here at Law and Crime, we're wishing you nothing but the best. All the best for you. All the best for your kids. Hopefully the movie is very well circulated. People see it. People hear this story. But Morgan Metzer, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. And again, I'm so happy to see you're okay.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I do hope the movie raises awareness. And my next hope is to write a book.
Oh
So
yeah,
that can help.
let me. I wasn't sure about that. So you are going to write a book about this?
I want to write a book. So we're
Okay,
going to see. I want to see how it goes. If anybody reaches out or
right.
kind of help me get the plan of the attack going. So, it could be raise even more awareness, maybe give more signs, more tips to how to, figure out whether or not if you're in an abusive relationship.
Well, I tell you what, if you end up writing a book about this, please come back on. Would love to continue the conversation about it because again, I think it's such an important story to tell.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.